In the 1930s, in a small town in the southern United States, a strange tale spread among the locals. It was said that deep in the dark swamps of Louisiana lay a hidden treasure. This treasure supposedly belonged to a cruel slave owner during the Civil War era who had been killed by the vengeful spirits of his slaves. It was believed that the treasure was cursed, guarded by both spirits and otherworldly beings. John Miller, a poor but ambitious man, did not believe in such tales. Desperate for wealth, he decided to find the treasure at any cost. Accompanied by 3 friends Jack, Sam, and Clara, he made a plan and headed into the swamp, armed with rudimentary equipment. On a hot summer evening, they arrived at the swamp. The humid air and the stench of stagnant water made it hard to breathe, but nothing could quench John's excitement. He carried an old map, set to show the way to the treasure. As they ventured deeper into the swamp, things began to change. The eerie silence, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and distant whispers unsettled the group. Clara, the most timid of them, said, "Maybe these stories are true. Maybe we shouldn't be here." But John laughed and replied, "You believe in fairy tales too much. We're making history, we're going to be rich." After hours of trudging through the swamp, they arrived at a peculiar spot the map pointed to. A dry, firm patch of land amidst the wet marsh. They began digging. The moist soil and tangled roots made the task difficult, but John was determined. After an hour, the sound of a shovel hitting something metallic ignited excitement among the group. An old metal chest was unearthed. With trembling hands, they broke its rusty lock. Inside, gold and ancient jewels glittered brightly, mesmerizing them. But the moment the chest was opened, a chilling gust of wind extinguished their lanterns. The air grew heavy, and the distant whispers turned into terrifying murmurs. Sam, panicked, said, "We need to leave. This place is cursed." Suddenly, a piercing, ghastly laughter echoed through the swamp. The fog thickened, and shadows began moving among the trees. Clara screamed and ran, but something invisible grabbed her and dragged her into the depths of the swamp. Her screams vanished into the murky waters. John, still clutching the treasure, shouted, "This is ours. You can't stop us." But the shadows closed in. One of them, with a half-burned face and empty eyes, reached out toward John. A searing pain spread through his chest. He collapsed, the chest slipping from his grasp. The following morning, only Jack, delirious and trembling, emerged from the swamp. He never spoke about that night, but locals claimed that strange noises, screams and sinister laughter could still be heard coming from the swamp at night. Some said the spirits still guard the treasure, ensuring no one dares approach it. Returned to the swamp. Years passed since that cursed night. Jack, the lone survivor, lived in silence and misery. Every night, he was haunted by nightmares of the swamp, the vengeful spirits, and Clara's screams. He drowned his sorrow in alcohol and avoided speaking of the treasure. One day, however, a man arrived in town. Frank Doyle, a wealthy and arrogant explorer, was known for chasing lost legends and hidden riches. Hearing about the swamp's cursed treasure, he convinced Jack to guide him there with promises of money and fame. At first, Jack refused, but Frank's persistence and the lure of wealth broke his resolve. This time, Frank brought a more prepared group. Himself, Jack, and 2 hired mercenaries. Unlike Jack, Frank laughed off the legends, believing that strength and firepower could solve anything. When they entered the swamp, everything felt eerily familiar to Jack. The same oppressive silence, the thick fog, and the haunting whispers returned. Jack muttered, "We shouldn't be here. This treasure is cursed." But Frank replied coolly, "Curses are just superstitions to scare fools. Just show me the way." After hours of navigating the swamp, they reached the same spot, a dry patch of land surrounded by twisted black roots that seemed to guard it like sentinels. Frank and the mercenaries began digging. Jack, trembling with fear, stood aside, praying they wouldn't find anything. But soon enough, the sound of metal against a shovel marked the discovery of another chest larger and sturdier than the last. Frank broke the lock. Inside was more than just gold and jewels. A weathered book with cryptic symbols filled the chest. Frank picked it up and flipped through the pages, ignoring Jack's terrified gaze. On one page, a sentence in Latin read, "He who breaks this seal shall forever be bound by the spirits." Frank chuckled and said, "More nonsense." But at that moment, a fierce wind swept through the swamp, plunging them into darkness. Shadows darker than the night emerged from the fog. One of the mercenaries shouted, "What's happening? What the hell is this?" The shadows began taking the form of broken, battered figures. One spirit, with a mournful, vengeful voice, spoke in English. "You have returned, sinners always return." One mercenary, panicking, pulled out his gun and fired at the shadows. The bullets had no effect. The shadows moved closer, dragging him into the earth with a blood-curdling scream. Frank, now visibly frightened, shouted at Jack, "How do we get out of here?" But Jack, on the verge of a mental breakdown, replied, "There's no way out. They won't let us leave." The shadows surrounded Frank. The spirit with the half-burnt face placed its hand on Frank's chest. He screamed as his body decayed rapidly, turning to dust within moments. Jack, left alone, fell to his knees and sobbed. He pleaded, "I'm innocent. I only showed them the way. Please, spare me." One spirit approached him, its face inches from his own, and said, "This is the last time you bring anyone here. If you return, we will take you as well." Jack never returned to the swamp. But months later, locals claimed he had gone mad, often talking to invisible figures in his house. Some say he, too, was eventually drawn into the swamp by the spirits, never to be seen again. The treasure still lies in the swamp, but no one dares set foot in the cursed land.